card for a parking problem.
Four in your 23.
Yeah, that's 4, I'll get a 28 from one truck when you're ready.
Go ahead.
From one truck, white Lincoln X-ray 985, should come back up 10.
So you had 2000. Patrick Spalding.
10-4. If you can just put a little note in something like that, I'm going to be leaving a note on a vehicle so they can remove it.
What? What? Rockingham 505. 505 enter vandalism case for Athens. Complainant, soon to be ex, slashed her tires and has made threatening comments to her. She's concerned he might return.
Yeah, forgive that to 32.
10-4. You're assigned to a vandalism case in Athens. Did you copy the 505?
Yeah, 4.
21.
No, 3 in Depot Street. Truck boy entry 5.
7435.
10. You can go 643 again.
143.
You go with that 43 you had. I didn't hear any, but I had jump looks likely down.
10-4. I just wanted to know if you should be put back 76 to Cabana Circle or to the subject's address.
Yeah, I'll be 23 back on that town property case, and I'll be 76 to the Williams Road address to see if I can find the owner.
10-4. 449 1120.
And 449 1121, thank you.
10-4.
Code 4. 4.
Road, we have 535.
Yeah, that was a great college.
535.
Should be. You guys know if someone who walked into my house. I'll slide up that way.
Caller is now been able to close the front door. He is now pounding on the door, trying to get in still. He's about 5 foot, long dark hair, got tie-dye shirt on, and number 21 is on.
We have separation. Inboard now. Excuse me. Good evening, everybody. I want to start off just by saying congratulations and thank you for people like Mizzy, Dave McGrath, Jules, Kirk Minahane, and yes, even Turtle Boy, for helping as citizens, not part of law enforcement, not part of the justice community, to bring about the result that we had yesterday. Obviously, the murderer of Sandra Birchmore is innocent until proved otherwise, but the evidence is compelling, and we're going to go over it later. And so the people and people like you, really everybody who just feels that there is a role to play by the public in with their true crime interest, that it's not just about entertainment, it's about justice, looking at evidence, holding killers or other types of criminals accountable, including the people that investigate things. So again, we had Missy on this channel last fall, and she was a wonderful young woman, and I don't know her outside of that, but I'm so proud of the role that she has played in this. And I'm sure she has mixed feelings, but must feel overall satisfied the last couple of days. So I'm very happy for her, but for everybody else that played a role in this. And so thank you for everybody that's done that, and everybody that has this kind of interest, not just in true crime because you want to experience something that's titillating or whatever, but because you believe in justice and you empathize with the victims. So I think everybody's contributed in a very positive way to that. So thank you, guys. We'll come back to the Birchmore case. I'm going to go over the very compelling evidence in the official document that was released. Very powerful evidence. So we're going to go over that. But first, just not spend too long on it, but I do want to go over something I spotted today in researching for the book on Karen Reed. This is something I've seen many times before in this video, and I didn't catch it till now. So sometimes you watch these things before the trial, but then if you watch them after the trial, they can have new meaning because now you have evidence that you didn't know before. But maybe when you saw that video last summer or during the year, you couldn't have put it together in the way that you can now. So let's pull up just a screen on this real quick, and we're going to watch and see if you guys can catch it. All right, I got two lined up, so hopefully this is the right one. Yeah, this is the right one.
Massachusetts supporters.
Let me just make sure my speaker is all right.
Formed around Karen Reed, charged with murder in January 2022 death of her boyfriend, Boston police officer John O'Keefe. Reed has strenuously denied the allegations.
I did not kill John O'Keefe. I've never harmed a hair on John O'Keefe's head.
Her defense, bare-knuckled and bold, is making national headlines. Her lawyers alleging in court documents that a fellow police officer was involved in O'Keefe's death and colluded with other people in a cover-up.
You're alleging that law enforcement officials in this state committed murder and that they're covering it up. Why would they want to be involved in this?
Because he's dead. I think things went too far. It was late. There was alcohol involved, but they're all family. And there's many of them involved.
After posting bail, Reed has spent much of the past 18 months in and out of court awaiting a trial date.
And me and my family and my attorneys and my team have marshaled every resource to get to the truth. It just feels like no one else wants it.
Prosecutors allege that Reed hit O'Keefe with her car after getting into an argument earlier in the day, leaving him to die in the middle of a snowstorm in January 2022. But Reed says she had no reason to harm her boyfriend.
I would call him the patron saint of Canton. He was just very selfless, frugal, and I think you'd be hard-pressed to find anyone that didn't care for John.
The couple first dated in their 20s and reconnected more than a decade later in the middle of the pandemic.
So how did you meet up again?
He had reached out to me on Facebook and he said, "Hey, blast from the past, how's things?" And when I saw his picture, his profile picture was with several young children. And then it triggered my memory that his sister and his sister's husband had passed away. And he told me, "Yeah, I have the kids now." I admired that. I thought that was amazing.
Soon, Reed says she became part of the family, often sleeping over at O'Keefe's house and helping take care of the kids.
He would go to work and I would stay with his niece and nephew. All of the breaks that the kids had, we did something.
But their relationship also had its struggles. Reeve says O'Keefe had been relying more on her to take care of the kids and that he criticized some of the decisions she made with them.
We had had an argument on New Year's Eve. We were away on vacation and he became incoherently drunk. And I ended up ringing in the new year with his niece and nephew. John didn't come back to our room till after 3 a.m. So that was rough. I felt very much taken advantage of. He apologized profusely for what happened on New Year's Eve. And he said, "If you can't get over it, then you need to spend some time at yours. I can't keep apologizing. I don't want to keep rehashing this."
A few weeks later, they were invited to meet up with some friends at the Waterfall Bar in Canton. And there, they ran into Brian Albert, a fellow Boston police officer who Reed says O'Keefe looked up to. Albert had led the city's gang unit before commanding the Fugitive Apprehension Team. It was the elite squad responsible for taking down some of the city's most dangerous criminals and featured in the 2013 TNT show, Boston's Finest.
1 minute we're walking around, everything's fine, and then 1 minute it's not fine.
Both times I met Brian Albert, he seemed like the type of person that you'd be surprised he's out socially because he doesn't seem like he ever wants to be there.
But at the bar,
I have to say, I don't know Brian Albert, but I like that description from a writer's standpoint of view. I like that.
Reed says there was an invitation to continue hanging out at Albert's home.
I said, "Can we make sure we're welcome here? Nobody extended the invite to me. I didn't hear the invite extended to you."
They drive to the Albert's house. What happens next is disputed.
So I pull at the foot of the driveway. It's snowing. John has no coat on. It's windy. So I drop him off. He goes up the driveway and approaches the side door. And as I see him approach the door, I look down at my phone.
Reed says after about 10 minutes of waiting in her car, she became irritated that O'Keefe still hadn't gotten in touch with her. And she drove back to his home where she continued calling him before she says she fell asleep around 1:30 in the morning. She then says she woke up before 5 a.m. He still wasn't home. She then started canvassing the.
So let's just replay this again. This part, not the whole thing, just that last few seconds.
I said, "Can we make sure we're welcome here? Nobody extended the invite to me. I didn't hear the invite extended to you."
They drive to the Albert's house. What happens next is disputed.
So I pull at the foot of the driveway. It's snowing. John has no coat on. It's windy. So I drop him off. He goes up the driveway and approaches the side door. And as I see him approach the door, I look down at my phone.
Reed says after about 10 minutes of waiting in her car, she became irritated that O'Keefe still hadn't gotten in touch with her. And she drove back to his home where she continued calling him before she says she fell asleep around 1:30 in the morning. She then says she woke up before 5 a.m. He still wasn't home.
Okay, guys. So she says that she hold on one second here. So she says she dropped him off at the foot of the driveway and saw him walk inside the door. I want to see, I have one other interview here. Another version of this interview. Let me pull this up here. That somebody sent me this today. Okay. All right, so I have to play this other shorter one for you here that I'm not sure which this interview is from. It's actually slightly different though. It's a different version of what she says there. So check this one out.
I thought could have
And it's in her words.
was that did I incapacitate him unwittingly somehow, and then in his drunkenness passed out?
Karen says they pulled up to the house and she waited in her SUV while John went to check things out. She says she watched him go to the door, put his head inside, then nothing.
I texted him, I called him, and within minutes of him exiting my car is not answering his phone. Minutes.
Okay, there's the smoking gun right there. So this is actually in the Today version, not in the Nightline version. Let's just replay that again real quick, the last part of it.
Go to the door, put his head inside, then nothing.
I texted him, I called him, and within minutes of him exiting my car is not answering his phone. Minutes.
Okay, that's impossible. That's dishonest. Okay, that's if you show this in trial, it shows how thoroughly dishonest she is, because she did not text him until I got the time here. Let me look at it. She texted him. This document is not opening properly for the moment, but I believe it was at 12. All right. At 12:55 and 31 seconds, she texted John, "I'm going home." At 12:55 and 50 seconds, she texted John, "See you later." At 1:04, she texted John, lying, saying, "I'm back in Mansfield. The kids are home alone." So this is interesting too, because that is yet more evidence to me that she didn't know that John was incapacitated, because otherwise that text makes no sense in any other context. But forgetting about that, the important thing here is the very first text that she sends from this time when, not counting earlier in the evening. So the very first text that she sends on the 29th is at 12:55. She's been home for 20 minutes. She's been home for 20 minutes. She tells the story both on Today and on the Nightline version of this is last summer when she tells this story. The way she tells it, she dropped John on at the foot of the driveway, watched him walk into the house, essentially, and then she waited for 10 minutes. And at some point, after waiting for 10 minutes, she called him and texted him. That's a lie. That is a lie. It's not a mistaken memory. That's a lie. Because she certainly could not have texted him, because she was home for 20 minutes when she sent that first text. But even the phone call, the very first phone call comes at 12:33. Her phone logged in to John's Wi-Fi somewhere between 12:36 and 12:36 and 59 seconds. The state doesn't say and probably doesn't know. The state, Adam Lally reported, or I think more, I should say Trooper Garino reported, that her phone connected to John's Wi-Fi at 12:36, but it doesn't know the second. So it's 12:36:00 or 12:36:59. We don't know. It's somewhere in that range. But it's not impossible that she called at 12:33 from still sitting out there, but you're making it really close there. Now she has to be able to drive home in under 4 minutes. So I wouldn't say that's impossible, but that's very unlikely. What's more likely is she called while she was driving home, but she definitely did not text. So to me, this is very close to a smoking gun. She's making this up. There was never, she never watched John. She never dropped John off at the foot of the driveway. She never watched him walk in the house. Now, most of us know from the rest of the evidence that that's a lie. But even if you're on the fence and you're thinking maybe she's telling the truth on that, right? And who can tell? But she definitely did not text him. She's describing her. She did not text him while she was sitting outside that house. Did not. It's impossible. There's no question that she logged. So that text is 20 minutes after. So there's no way. She's just not telling the truth. She's making that whole story up. And that information right there is proof of it. And like I said, the call was unlikely. So more and more, the more I study this evidence, my theory of the case, I don't want to say my theory, but what I've become convinced of since the trial is that she backed up not to hit John. but because she was angry, and the only way she knew to go home was by Cedar Crest, and then more or less raced home. But I don't mean, but not at like Indy 500 speeds. She just it's night, and when you go to Google Maps, it'll average your speed unless you adjust it. It'll give you a route time, but we looked it up, and that's based on an average speed of 25 miles per hour. Yeah, but if you change that on your own to 35 miles per hour, then it takes her 4 minutes and 30 seconds or 35 seconds, I think, to get home by Google Maps. But we've also had people test this, and it actually only takes 4 minutes and several seconds to go that route, or any of the routes really. But at that time of night, there's no traffic. There's the only stop signs on that are on Cedar Crest. Then there's no stop signs on Dedham Street. There's none on Pleasant Street. So those are the two longest stretches of road. She'd be able to easily drive well over 35 miles an hour. So if you have to average 35 miles an hour to do it, you have to calculate in slowing down for turns, and if you decide to at least slow down at those stop signs on Cedar Crest Street. So she probably drove, I'd say, on Dedham Street and Pleasant Street 40 miles an hour, and with the stop signs, instead of coming to a complete stop, just kind of slowed down. It's a very, very residential area, no traffic, and I think a lot of people probably would drive that way anyways, and she's angry and drunk. So if she stopped at all. So we've had people test this route several times, and it's not difficult or even dangerous to drive just a little faster than the speed limit and get back to One Meadows in that 4.5 minutes. So it's not difficult at all. So what can be done? Can this be used in trial? Well, yes. Would it be decisive in trial? I think it'd be powerful in trial, possibly even enough to force her to feel like she has to take the stand to explain it, right? That would remain to be seen. Now, the state did try to get this evidence. They need to have the actual video. They need to get the entire unedited video. So they can't just take a clip from TV like we can. And what they really need also is the reporter. Because you see the reporter there adds some description in both of those cases. But, Karen herself says that she saw John walk in. Now, we can't prove that she didn't watch John walk in. That's the whole point of the trial. But we can prove that she did not text him at that time, and she very likely did not call him while she was sitting there parked, because the first call is at 12:33. So is there a chance of getting this footage from that last one there is from the Today Show. So I forget, is that NBC or CBS? I forget now. So you have to get that. That was the one where she mentions the texting and the calling. Now, and who knows what else is in there when you get all of the unedited footage, right? Because they're going to interview her for a lengthy period of time, and then they'll edit down to what they want for the show. You can understand why especially these national news companies like 60 Minutes or Nightline or things like that, they don't want to be too quick to give this stuff up, because that would discourage other guests in the future from coming on their show, especially people that are awaiting trial. So in their own selfish interest, they don't want to be too quick to give it up. But so these companies are out of state, so you'd have to get a Massachusetts judge to sign an order, or however that works. We'll have to get Mahoney on sometime to talk about it. And that would go to a judge in that state where that corporate headquarters were. And I don't know what would be involved, but also having to try to subpoena the reporter to come in and testify. But it's doable. And we're not sure why those companies were not forced to comply. We're not sure if the prosecution went through all the proper steps in order to make that happen. I got to be, it's very hard sometimes to comment on what the prosecution did or didn't do correctly, or what they might have done incorrectly when you're a civilian and you're on the outside. You're not a lawyer. You're not you never were a prosecutor like myself. But I don't think it's unreasonable at this point to say, especially given in light with the new federal indictment in the Birchmore case, there are a lot of reasons for us to trust the competency of that office, the Norfolk County DA's office. I'm not blaming anybody in specific. in particular. Adam Lally, in addition to having this case and having to question every single witness, where the defense got to divide it up between 3 attorneys, Lally had to do that himself, and he had other cases going on that he's prosecuting. We remember him in hearings in court where he's leaving there to go to the next courtroom. So an enormous burden was placed on this man. So, but I'm not trying to criticize him. Is Morrissey to blame? I don't really know. But just so to me, the safest way to say it is there seems to be issues with general competency, certainly in the Norfolk County DA's office. I think that's a fair thing to say. And maybe time will show that that's not exactly true, or there were explanations for these things. But at this point, I think that's a reasonable thing to at least be suspicious of. I guess while we're doing this, we'll bring on one more version of this. This was from Fox 25.
Police officer John O'Keefe joined friends for drinks.
We were happy, having fun, laughing, just very normal.
Did you ever feel you were overserved that night, as
No,
they say?
no.
Later, Karen and John were invited to the home of a fellow Boston cop. Neither knew him well. What happened next is disputed. Karen says they pulled up to the house and she waited in her SUV while John went to check things out. She says she watched him go to the door, put his head inside, then nothing.
I texted him, I called him, and
No, actually, this is from the same one, the Today Show. Sorry about that. I had a different one from Fox 25. All right, we'll see. But we see it right there. She texted and called him. All right, so we'll move on from this. I shouldn't say I found. The crack research team at Yellow Cottage Tales found something interesting I wanted to share with you. Let me just pull this up. There's an article on this. So if you would like to join the crack research team of Yellow Cottage Tales, the pay starts out not very good, but it doubles every 2 weeks. Of course, doubling zero doesn't lead to much growth, but in any case, this was one of our valued members found this. So we were doing research on Scanlon, and this is an interesting case. So just before we go in, this was a crazy case, right? And I'm even a little sympathetic to Scanlon about what he did in this case, but it might be a little bit of a character insight. So I also was reading this morning the interview by the state police that was entered into evidence maybe this past winter, like January, February. They did an interview with Steve Scanlon. Steve is a private investigator, but he used to work for the sheriff's department. And he is someone that the defense tried to portray as a whistleblower, someone who had evidence of what really went on supposedly inside 34 Fairview. And so he suspects, and it does seem to be the case, that the defense leaked his name to Turtle Boy, but not just to Turtle Boy, because I have to say that name was out there. I was getting, who am I, right? I don't have the reach. I don't have the kind of resources that Turtle Boy had, and I had almost no resources back in the spring of 2023. And I was getting people telling me that Scanlon was the key in this. That was actually back in May of 2023. And I got different reports on Steve Scanlon. But everybody seemed to think that he had some kind of inside information. So Turtle Boy, actually, there's one of the counts of wiretapping that's against him, I believe, is because he had Steve Scanlon called him, and thinking he was avoiding the wiretapping laws, he used a Rhode Island number. It's legal to record a call in Rhode Island. He thought that would make it legal, but it didn't make it legal because Steve Scanlon's not in Rhode Island. And I'm not sure if that's the reason, or if it's because the call was not placed from Rhode Island, not that it was just placed with a Rhode Island phone. I really forget. I forget all the intricacies of the wiretapping laws. But in any case, it was illegal. but certainly it was scummy. You're constantly recording people without their permission and then releasing it. And there was nothing in it. I mean, and you could even tell. I had corn for supper, a piece of one of those little corn things in my tooth. And I brushed my teeth too, but you know how that stuff is. So when I listened to the interview, it was clear that Scanlon didn't know anything, or at least he wasn't admitting to knowing anything. And it was clear that Turtle Boy took that too. And but yet they still kept trying to present this as though they have a leaker that knows what happened inside the house. But Scanlon told the state police more or less the same thing that he told Turtle Boy, which is that I don't have anything. Maybe we'll go back, and if we have time later, and read that interview with Scanlon, because it was kind of interesting. But in any case, so we're trying to figure out what made Scanlon come forward in the first place. So Scanlon said that he reached out to Karen on Facebook, and this is like in the early days. So within a couple of weeks, I believe, of John's death. So before there was any movement, a year before there was any movement, any Facebook groups, any pink shirts, long before that, he had some reason to reach out to Karen, who's not someone he knew. Now, he says that he did not, at that time when he reached out to her, know that it involved Brian Albert, who actually is kind of a friend of his. He hadn't seen him for a few years, but he was someone that he used to work with a little bit and drink with. And even when like a decade before, when Brian Albert was recovering from an accident at home, Scanlon would go visit him. So he knows where the home is, knows the address, and knows the Alberts. So I don't know if I really believe that Steve Scanlon didn't know that information when he reached out to Karen, or when he went to Gennedy's office. I don't know. But he says he didn't. And so it's very interesting to try to piece together the specific aspect of the origination of third-party culprit theory. There's a lot more that we know that I'm not going to go into right now. Some of it we've talked about before, but I'm really trying to nail down all the specifics of it. But certainly, Steve Scanlon met so when he reached out to Karen, he said, I believe that you're innocent, that John was beat up. And he looked like he was beat up, which was interesting, because how could he know that? Because those autopsy photos weren't even given to Karen's team till much later, and they certainly weren't made public until Turtle Boy did. So how would he know that? And now it's possible one of the first responders had said something like that. Maybe he knew that, but he hasn't. That's one of those things I'd like to find out from. So Steve Scanlon, I don't think you listen to this show, but if you happen to, reach out. Everybody knows I'll give you a fair shake. I'm only interested in the truth. I'm not interested in trying to exploit any situation. So why did you think John looked beat up when you weren't there and there were no autopsy photos? So what exactly does that mean? I'm not sure. So I'd like to have you fill that in. But in any case, he had some reason to reach out to Karen and see if she was interested. And he said he'd be willing to work for her for free. And this is, when I say this, remember that when we go over to this article in a minute, and just remember his motive and what kind of makes him tick. So she said, "What, you have to contact my lawyer, David Yannetti." So Scanlon meets at Yannetti's office, and in the room is private investigator hired by Karen and her team, Paul Makowski. Makowski is a retired Medford police officer. Seems to be there's no blemishes on his career. So no reason to think anything critical of Makowski. But anyways, Makowski was in the room. Is that a coincidence that Makowski's in the room when Yannetti meets with Scanlon? I don't know. Probably not. And Yannetti gives him a check said to be between $1,250 and $1,500 For what? And Scanlon took that check without any kind of a contract or a job assignment related to it. But he must have been not sure if what he was doing was proper. So he consulted his lawyer, and his lawyer said, you can't cash that check. So he didn't cash it. So, you get into things here. Sometimes things can be shady, but not super shady, where people are trying to do the right thing, but also trying to satisfy their own ambitions in life, right? So we'll go to this article here. This is an interesting story. So a deputy sheriff in the Worcester County Sheriff's Office, this is from, what the date is here. This is not too long. This is from 2016, so 8 years ago. A deputy sheriff in the Worcester County Sheriff's Office admitted in testimony on Thursday that he did not follow department protocol upon finding luggage on the side of Interstate 190 that contained the body of 5-year-old Jeremiah Oliver. Steve Scanlon, who is also the deputy director of internal affairs for the sheriff's office, so pretty good job, told Worcester Superior Court Judge Richard Tucker about various conversations he had with an inmate in March and April of 2014 that eventually led to the discovery of Oliver's discarded body. I mean, look at this cute little kid. This is why I don't really generally like true crime. It's just makes me want to go back to old episodes of Seinfeld. It's just to think what happened to this kid. But Oliver was discovered missing in late 2013. His body was found on April 18th, 2014 in that suitcase off 190. Alberto Sierra, the boyfriend of Oliver's mother, Elsa Oliver, is facing multiple charges in the case, also including kidnapping, assault and battery on a child, and permitting injury to a child, and reckless endangerment of a child. Sierra, though, through his attorney Alan Black, has filed a motion to suppress verbal and written statements he made to jailhouse informant Eric Perez, which led to the hearing Thursday. So, using his position as a corrections officer, but pretty high, a deputy director of internal affairs, so a very advanced corrections officer. However they did it, they had a snitch inside the cell adjacent to the guy that they suspected might know what happened to this missing child. The information that led Scanlon and his partner, Mark Morrissey, so it's his partner, to Oliver's body came from Perez, who was in the Worcester County Jail in March and April of 2014, held in the same unit as Sierra. So it's in jail, not in prison. So I'm not sure what he was charged with at that point, but they were trying to find the body. So you can see where just, missing kid, big deal for everybody, right? And certainly in law enforcement, a lot of pressure for these guys to come up with a solution. The prosecution asked Scanlon if he ever had contacted state police, Worcester County District Attorney's Office, or the Fitchburg Police Department at any point during the time he received the information. And he did not. And that's where the rule violation came in. He's a corrections officer. It's not his assignment to go out looking for pieces of evidence in a case. You have to go through the proper channels for that. And he didn't. I think he has a somewhat understandable explanation, as you'll see. So Assistant Defense Attorney Cheryl Riddle asked Scanlon if it was fair to say that the sheriff's deputies have no jurisdiction over unattended death cases. And Scanlon said yes. Riddle asked if Scanlon had ever been asked by state police to investigate an unattended death, homicide, or missing child case, and he said no. So the only thing that he would have been authorized to look into would have been an inmate dying in custody. Riddle then asked Scanlon if it was fair to say that he did not follow the department's policies and procedures, and Scanlon said yes. Following Perez's arrest on charges for trafficking heroin and cocaine, Scanlon spoke to Perez in a private meeting. He testified, telling the inmate he could come to him with any information about the issues in the jail, such as narcotics being smuggled in or weapons. So, you know, what does that meeting really look like? Who knows, right? However, you're making a deal with this guy. He knows that he's going to put him in a cell, or he's already been assigned to a cell. He probably put him there next to the guy that's associated with the missing child, and to see if he can. And he's going to say, "Look, if you help me out, we can help you out." And so that's just a practice. I'm not bothered by any of that. That's a practical way to try to get something done. Now, did he threaten him and say, "Hey, your life in here can be miserable if you don't help"? There's no evidence of that, so obviously that would be wrong. But maybe this guy was scared. Maybe he needed some protection. It's not too much fun in prison or in jail in this case. You have someone like Turtle Boy, and they put you in protective custody, so it's safe. You're not exposed to anybody else because Turtle Boy was high enough profile. They were afraid that he was going to get injured or killed on the yard, so they kept him separate. But they don't do that with everybody. Scanlon said he hoped Perez would help notify him of any illegal drugs in the jail because of his prior experience trafficking and as a known gang member. Scanlon said he never promised Perez anything specific for his cooperation, but did tell him he could get help with issues in the facility if needed. So he's coaxing him, at the very least. But Scanlon said Perez came to him with a number of tips that never panned out. So keep that in mind. So this is important because Scanlon has to explain why, when he gets the information, he goes out on his own instead of contacting the prosecution or the state police or the local police. So that's why Scanlon said he did his own investigation. This is the key. Scanlon, a correctional officer, took it on himself to do his own investigation here. Now, again, when we see the details, I'm not bothered by it. But I think it resulted in him getting fired. So we'll see. So he says, we get a lot of information and we attempt to verify and validate that information so we're not wasting anybody's time. Perez spoke to Sierra through an air vent at the rear of their adjacent cells where he befriended Sierra and asked him about the Oliver case. Sierra eventually told Perez that Oliver's body was in a black suitcase and that he and his girlfriend discarded it off the side of the highway. Scanlon said he went to his supervisor, Superintendent David Tuttle, with that information. So he did go to his supervisor. So that's good. Using directions that Perez provided him, Scanley and Morrissey twice went out to I-90 to look for the suitcase. They were in plain clothes and driving an unmarked car. As they were walking alongside the highway, during their first trip, a state police trooper pulled over to ask them what they're doing. And Scanlon lied to the trooper, said they were looking for a lost hubcap. He says at the trial here, we didn't want to lie to anybody, but at that point, we didn't want to alert anybody that we were looking into the validity of the claims Sierra had made to Perez, because if he told the trooper would have to call in that information. This is kind of consistent with what the information that I was first given on Steve Scanlon was by someone that knows him very well. And I didn't know anything about him at the time. But he basically said, I don't want to put words in his mouth because I don't have his quotes in front of me, but it was something to the effect that, Scanlon can be a little ambitious and a little sketchy in that way, but he would never lie under oath. It was interesting, funny. I wonder if the guy who told me this knew this particular story. He didn't tell me this story, or even indicate anything about it. But either he knew about it, or he had Scanlon pegged very well, that he was not someone that would lie under oath, but that he might have a little bit of a shady side, a little bit. And I don't mean that in a super judgment way. I mean, we all see our favorite TV shows or movies when the detective is slightly shady because he's trying to get to the truth, or so. I'm not justifying that. I'm just saying, you know. So that first time that they went out and the state trooper stopped him, they didn't find the suitcase. So he went back to jail and he got more information. And then he and his partner, Morrissey, but their supervisor, Tuttle, did seem to know about it. They went back out a few days later and found the luggage that Oliver's body was in. It was about 30 or 40 feet off the roadway. Scanlon said he didn't touch, this is important too. So he didn't touch or move that luggage in any way. He called it into his supervisor, Tuttle. Now, he says he was under the impression that Tuttle alerted either the state police, the district attorney's office, or the Fitchburg police. I don't know. It sounds like maybe they did. Maybe Tuttle didn't. I don't know. The state ended its questioning. The case will pick up again Tuesday with Sierra's defense attorney, Alan Black, cross-examining Scanlon. So this was obviously Sierra's trial. Oliver was last seen alive on September 14th, 2013. The autopsy report on Oliver listed the cause of death as, quote, homicidal violence of undetermined etiology. Elsa Oliver, Jeremiah's mother, is in custody on numerous charges, including kidnapping, assault and battery on a child, and reckless endangerment. So I'm not seeing here that anybody was charged with murder. Hopefully somebody was at some point. I don't know how that story ends up. But you see a little bit. So like a lot of people that become corrections officers, the real goal is to is to get a job in law enforcement. Those jobs. So Jules, thank you. Jules says that her boyfriend was charged with murder. Thank you, Jules. I very much appreciate that. You're turning into a wealth of knowledge. Nobody seemed to really know much about this case, but Jules knew about it. So, anyways, you see a little bit of a pattern here where what exactly motivated Scanlon here? You know, he says the reason he didn't alert the police before we went looking for the suitcase. The proper procedure is to give that information to the state police or the prosecutor's office, or at least the local police, so they can go look for it. But he wanted to be the hero here, maybe, right? Again, I'm putting, who knows? Maybe he just really wanted to do the right thing. In any case, he did manage to solve this case. I have a little wife. Huh. I'm just reading somebody's text coming to me. So anyways, so we see him kind of he's a guy, in some ways you want this, right? He's not just a guy that's punching into work and punching out. And instead, so someone just sent me a message and then took it back. Let me take this off. She said, I have a little wife, which I'm not married. So maybe she's around here somewhere. I don't know. So here you have someone that's not just punching in the clock. So he is motivated, right? Now, whether that was in personal ambition to get ahead, to be the hero, or just felt bad for the 5-year-old boy, we can't really say. But he didn't follow protocol, and as a result of that, he lost his job. So that was a little bit unwise, right? Because it didn't lead to any heroic result. Instead, it led to him losing his job. So I don't know. So it's tricky. On the one hand, you're happy that you have a guy that's proactive and not just punching in the time clock. He's trying to do something with his life related to law enforcement. And he is in a field that is law enforcement adjacent, right? So in the Karen Reed case, again, inserting himself a little bit here, right? By reaching out to Karen and saying, I'm willing to do work for you for free because I believe you're innocent. So I think it's an interesting kind of character profile and how these things work. All right. Probably almost time to get to Birchmore. Make sure I didn't miss anything else. So I don't follow the Turtle Boy case very closely, but I guess today he was in court and the assistant prosecutor who's handling the case, Cosgrove, retired Judge Cosgrove, because Attorney Mello, who is the special prosecutor, is unhealthy or unwell. And it turns out Cosgrove informed them that he had some prior business with the judge in that case. So the defense moved to get a new judge. So that's the status of that. Also, Turtle was on the Kirk Minihane show. And Kirk Minihane, I've never seen that series. What is that channel called? I have it listed here. I did open it up here. Hold on one second. So his series was called The Case. Now, Minihane, I used to listen to. He was a sports guy on WEEI or the Sports Hub. I forget which one. Probably EEI. And at the time, they had new ownership that was really over pushing this idea that conflict, which is the center of drama, right, in film and theater and stuff like that, that conflict is what was needed to make the ratings go up. So they were pushing all kinds of conflict, and Minihane was good at that. But then once they decided they weren't looking for conflict, or maybe he decided he had enough of it. I don't remember how it broke down, but there was some interesting shows with him on sports back then. But so he ended up going with Barstool Sports and doing a very well-received documentary called The Case. I don't know what other cases they covered. Maybe they just covered Sandra. I really don't know. I'm going to have to check it out. But it looks like they did a couple of seasons on it, and they ended up feeling very disappointed that they weren't able to. They felt very confident that Birchmore had not committed suicide. And it is, I can understand, like, if you really dig into something and you feel like you have enough evidence and you're just not able to get it through to the people that have to have it, and you feel frustrated. It sounds like they really felt that, but now hopefully they feel more fulfilled for the role that they played in this. Sorry, the dog's barking again. I'm not sure if you can hear it. So Turtle Boy went on the Minihane show, and naturally Minihane brought up Karen Reed. Now, one of the interesting things that Turtle Boy said, I think Minahane's question was to the effect, are the feds going to now, are they going to arrest the suspects in this conspiracy like they did in the Birchmore case? And Turtle Boy said, no, the feds aren't coming. Nope. Nobody tells Sean, please. Nobody tells Sean. He wakes up every morning going, feds, 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 looking around. But Turtle Boy's not stupid. And here's the thing. When you look at that document yesterday that we're going to go over in a second, this is really detailed. So the feds were only investigating Birchmore, according to Josh Levy in the press conference yesterday, for a year. Unless I misunderstood that. They've been investigating Karen since August of 2022. That's 2 years. No arrests, no information found by the time of the trial, anyways, that was in any way exculpatory or indicated a conspiracy. Nothing. They were required by the agreement they signed to turn over any of that evidence to both sides. They didn't. And now Sean thinks they're sleeping on that Josh Levy has this evidence under his pillow and he's saving for a rainy day. I don't know what to say. They were required by an agreement they signed, protective order with both sides, to turn over any relevant evidence. So if they found it, they had to find it after the trial, and they had all the communications from all the relevant people in the way that only the feds can get, and in a way which seems to have broken the case in the Birchmore situation. So Turtle Boy understands the feds aren't coming in the Karen Reed case. They've been looking at it 2 years, and they aren't coming. And so I'm sure Turtle Boy has disappointed many Free Karen Reed people by saying that. But he moves on to other things like, oh, but the conspiracy is still true anyways. All right. So it's true, but the feds didn't find anything, whatever. But at least he knows. It's like at some point it's not sane to believe that the feds are still coming in this case, which means it's not really not really normal anymore to believe that Karen Reed is innocent. I'm not trying to be offensive by saying it that way. I don't know. It's just normal was the word that came to my mind. Maybe there was a better choice that we could choose. All right, so let's go to Birchmore. I know I've already probably spent too much time on this because there's a lot to do with Birchmore. And the Birchmore case, it's a wow, right? I mean, so many aspects of this. Where is this document? Hold on one second. All right, got it. I was actually going to come on yesterday and talk about this stuff. Let me just break for a second to check with Tom. Tom, if you're here, I know Tom was grabbing some ice cream. Hopefully he's here. Is my mic good? Because they always have me turn it down on Court TV. I adjusted it back up, but hopefully I don't know if I did it enough. Tom, how's the mic sound? Is it all right? Do I need to turn it up or down or leave it where it is? I took a stab and turned it up a little after the Court TV appearance, but it's so I can't tell on my end until somebody tells me if it needs to be turned up or down. And what kind of ice cream are you eating, Tom? Audio's good. All right. Thank you. All right. That's our production manager, Thomas Fleming. Sailboat Wolf said my mic is good too. Thank you. And Jules is now known as Jules the One and Only. Jules always seems to have a different name up here. Oh, just got some thank you. So James Clay, justice for Sandra and John equals prison for killers. Well, as we're going to see, every case is unique, right? So every case is unique. And with every murder, we want justice for the real killer. And I would think that that is something that maybe unites both sides, is that they want justice in the Karen Reed case. So let's have that moment of unity. And Tom gifted the memberships. Thank you, Tom. These memberships come, Tom, for $2.99 a month. Tom will come to your house once a year and pour you a beer. He gets to pick the day. Thank you, Thomas. So the only thing that really comes with the membership right now is you're welcome to join us on our Discord, in which case, if you have a comment or a question during the show, I will go to it automatically. That's not a big deal, I know, but I don't know what else to give you. I wish I had more. I did actually. I promise I'm going to get to the Birchmore case in 30 seconds. Dude Abides always has something interesting, and that's one of my favorite movies. The right killers have been apprehended in both Sandra Birchmore and John O'Keefe's murder. I agree with that. The dude abides. Absolutely. So people have been asking me to get over a year ago, trying to find ways to fund this channel, which there was no money coming in. I set up the account where I put t-shirts up there. And obviously you'd have to sell thousands of t-shirts to even just make a few bucks. It's not worth it. But I keep them up there. Some of the stuff had nothing to do with Yellow Cottage Says. It was just my initial attempts at working with AI art and stuff like that. So I thought it was kind of cool. But people like that poster I made back there. So I got a version. You know what? I already got the document. I'll show it after. I got a version of that on a t-shirt. So if anybody's interested, I'll put the link up after. It's AI made. It's at Yellow Cottage Tales. This one says evidence plus logic equals truth. The one I have up now says standing up against the mob. So it's the same Yellow Cottage Tales, but it says standing up against the mob. And in the back is an AI version of the Boston skyline. So I don't know. I know some people like Rogue really like that. So I said, all right, I'll throw it in so people can get a t-shirt. I think I make like $1 on that shirt. So for those who say I'm grifting, all right. All right, so let's get to the document here. Let me make this, see if I can make this a little bit bigger. All right, this is an amazing document. This is, just have to warn you, disturbing. Very disturbing document. And I'm going to try to just go through it in a matter-of-fact kind of way. And if anybody wants this document, email me at leitskev, LEITSKEV, @gmail.com, and I'll be happy to send it to you. leitskev@gmail.com. So what we're going to be looking into as we go through this document, and all of us have to be considering, obviously, after you read this, after we go through this, if you're not already, you will be convinced that Farwell killed Sandra Birchmore. And so among the questions you'll be asking, why didn't the state find this? Is there a good explanation? Is it all because of the medical examiner? Is the fault with the state police, with the district attorney's office? It's a complicated issue. And we have to really, really, really try hard not to rush to conclusions too quickly. I'm not saying this. I don't know anybody I'm not a back the blue guy. I'm not anti-blue. I'm a back the truth guy. I'm a just stand back and take it easy and look at the evidence instead of rushing to conclusions on anything, whether it's politics or sports or whatever. It can be annoying to some people. I know people sometimes would like it when we just immediately jump to quick conclusions. And I know people can jump to conclusions here. Aha, I knew it all along. And it's all rigged. It was all a rigged investigation because cops never investigate their own. Okay, maybe. But we can't jump to that conclusion. We have to really look at the evidence. And also, another thing that people are going to say is, see, the feds are the good guys. Well, it's not that simple either. So you have police that in a certain situation, I'm sure even Officer Farwell here, probably at some point, I think he became a detective. So there were probably cases that I have no idea, but there are probably cases that he did a fairly good job and it resulted in convictions. It's a separate case, so it's very possible that the feds did a good job here. They seem to have. But at the same time, that something is fishy going on in the Karen Reed case. There's just too much evidence in the Karen Reed of something that really smells in the U.S. Attorney's Office. I mean, really stinks hard. I mean, stinks that even if there had been a conspiracy at 34 Fairview, it still stinks because the feds are communicating in a very regular way, feeding information to Karen Reed and her defense team. That's not how it works. That's not how it works. The feds are supposed to be a one-way street. They take information. That's it. And they're notorious for that. But yet here they are telling Karen Reed's team, telling Karen herself, for example, when witnesses, what day they're going to appear before the federal grand jury. That can't happen. An FBI agent seems to be communicating regularly, was at the time, at least last year at this time, with one of Karen's top media minions, Sean McDonough. And when he tells you she wasn't, no. He's not telling you the truth like on many things. Now, I don't know how many of those communications existed, but there's no reason for any communications between the FBI and some guy sitting down in Florida who had no connection to the case. There's no reason to talk to him ever. So if there's 3 or 4 calls, it's improper. It's improper. There's something stinky about it. There's no excuse for Josh Levy to do this past November at a time when he knew that they had found no evidence of a conspiracy. Yet he's doing a conference call with the defense team over murder. Someone charged for murder with a case coming up in months. He's doing a teleconference call with them, telling them to delay the trial. That's not right. There's something fishy about that. This is not just a matter of the feds researched the case and they were doing their due diligence trying to get to the truth. And sometimes you find something was wrong, like in the case of Birchwell, and sometimes you don't. No. It's not like that. And they seem to have been getting communications very early on in this case of multiple people that were accused by the defense. They weren't suspected by any prosecutor anywhere. There's no evidence against them. They were just accused by a defense theory. And here's the feds going and getting their communications. That's disturbing. That shouldn't happen. That can't happen. That's a violation of their civil liberties. To get that information without predication, that's Big Brother. That's something that I think all of us are supposed to be against, right? I don't know. So unless you're inclined to believe, I trust the Big Brother to do whatever he wants because he can always be trusted. No, just like corruption happens in every organization. So it's going to happen at local, state police, federal. But with the feds, you give them that much power. That much power, absolute power corrupts absolutely, right? So it's a dangerous thing. We do have to give the feds some power. And it seems to have been effective here in the Birchwell case. But getting information without proper predication can't happen. So anyways, all right, let's get to it. So, statement of facts. I won't read every word of this because it's somewhat long. So I have highlighted, so we'll skip to that. Farwell is 38 years old and resides in northeastern Massachusetts with his spouse and children. I believe he has 3 children, unless he's had another one since Sandra's death. He's licensed to carry firearms and has 10. We were under the impression last year that he had moved after he was terminated. He was terminated not very long after Sandra's death because they knew that they had found out around that time that he was sleeping with Sandra while he was working. And so he was terminated, as was his twin brother, who's not mentioned in this indictment, but she also, Birchmore was being passed around to her and their supervisor. I think his name was Divine, and he's not mentioned here either. And he's a lawyer here in Massachusetts. So we had heard that he had moved to Washington, D.C. I don't remember, was he working airport security or something? But then if they tracked him down, maybe with the help of pressure like Mizzy and like Kirk Minihane, keeping the public, and Dave McGrath keeping the public focused on this case, that might have been a reason that he lost his job down in Washington and was decertified, or whatever that process is that you have to have for that. And we were told he had moved, I believe, to New Mexico, which was also, we talked about this on a show last fall, which was suspicious because is he trying to get to the border? Is he trying to get close to the border in case he gets word? I don't know. But at some point, he felt comfortable. He moved back to Massachusetts. Probably a mistake. And he was arrested yesterday by a SWAT team. He served in the United States Army, 2004 to 2008. Explosive expert. First worked as a police officer in Wellesley. Then in 2012, he started working as a cop in Stoughton. And that's right around the time, I think, Sandra joined the Explorers Cup. So it says prior to 2017, the Stoughton Police Department operated the Stoughton Police Officers Academy, which was known as the Explorers. And so you get these kids that are interested in law enforcement. It was mostly boys. I've seen the picture. I'm not sure if there was any other girls in it besides Sandra, but it's just a kid. She's a little kid. She's like 80 pounds, 12 years old. And Farwell was already eyeing her. And when you'll see from the documents, she was eyeing him too. But she's a kid. She's not expected to know better. He's not only not a kid, he's in a position of authority. So yeah, she was 12 years old. Oh, so she actually began participating in 2010 when she was 12, and she remained in the so he I don't know. Then it says here Farwell was her instructor during that time period. So it sounds like I don't know. That's not clear to me. So if Farwell didn't start as a cop in Stoughton until 2012, she must have been in that program for a couple of years before he was there, but it's not clear there. He groomed and sexually exploited Birchmore when she was a child. So we'll see from the text that he slept with her when she was 15. She later has said, well, we'll get to it. Continued to exploit her when she became an adult, had sex with her while on duty. And according to the federal government, in December 2020, Farwell learned that he had impregnated Birchmore. And this is known from the texts. So I'm calling them texts, but they're iMessages. And I don't believe that the state police had any of these. And so the evidence is very powerful, but it's something that seemingly only the feds could get because they were able to get a warrant for these communications from Apple. Now, we don't know if they actually got any communications related to the Karen Reed case. We do know they got the communication. How would you call it? So you can subpoena to get the, I'm not sure how to phrase it, but the listing of the communications without the content of the communications. So with a subpoena, the feds can find out who the person called and who they texted, but you don't have any of the contents of that. It takes something a little stronger, a warrant, to actually find out what's in the texts. So obviously Birchmore knew she was pregnant, but there's a lot more to this. You'll see that this was a planned pregnancy. So, all right. So she was killed on, I believe, February 1st, 2022. 2021. I guess, no, I'm sorry, 2021, right? Yeah, it was 2021. So Sandra was killed on February 1st, 2021. On January 24th, so about a week before, Farwell started taking, so when the state, in the indictment, they say that he was planning the murder. And I was like, all right, well, you got to see that. But no, I'm convinced, I saw it. They did a good job arguing the case here. So one of the things he did was he had never wanted a key before. And a week before, suddenly he wanted a key to her apartment. And there's proof that he never wanted it before because she seemed herself, from the text that you can see, baffled as to why suddenly he wanted this. A couple of days after that, he was casing her apartment, searching for places the government says to carry out the murder. He inspected her bathroom and closet, places where items could be hung. Now, she does say in her text that his behavior was strange enough that she told her friends about it. So, I should have got this video. It's on one of my old ones. I'm looking at the document now. I can't see, but if somebody wants to email me the video or the link to the video, but we played it on our channel last fall when I was with Dave and Aaron, and it shows him. He's the last person to visit her apartment, and it shows him getting on the elevator. He's got on a hat and a mask, and then when he gets off, when I first saw it, I was like kind of stunned. I was like, this guy was so clearly trying to avoid being identified. Now, of course, it was during the pandemic, so he had that justification for wearing a mask. And we were told this ourselves back then by somebody that's a Stoughton police officer. He was notorious for being resistant to any mask mandate. So it seemed unlikely, but it was more, you could just, his whole body language, the way he was walking, the way he had the hat on and everything like that. He really did seem to be trying to hide himself, but that, could be just because he's married, right? And in fact, his wife gave birth the next day. So he also had been directing Birchmore to delete her messages and any evidence on. But you'll see there's a reason why. There's a reason why he decided at this time to kill her, and it wasn't just because she was pregnant. All right, so here's another thing. So when I was talking about this case with somebody privately over the last few days, one of the things that I was saying was it's one thing to have a motive, like she was putting a lot of pressure on him where she had the power to destroy his life, to destroy his family, destroy his job, and to put him in jail because he had slept with her inside while on duty, so you lose your job. He slept with her while she was underage, so you get charged, and with rape, statutory rape. And in addition, she had told him that she had a letter that she was going to send to his wife. So she really had him by the balls. But still, even if he makes that decision that I really need to be rid of this girl, to be able to have the ability to murder somebody, to take a woman who is less than half your size, someone who you've known for a long time and had a relationship with for a long time, to be able to kill somebody like that with your bare hands, it's a big leap from deciding that you want her out of your life and are willing to have her die, but to be willing to do that. But it becomes a little bit more believable. So before I had found this evidence that came out in the document yesterday, I was saying to people I was talking with, it's like, it's a bit, how do you go from, there had to be some history of him, like where he maybe had raped someone or physically, there had to be some history here to make this a little bit more understandable. And it turned out there was. So you'll see from the specific messages that again are disturbing. His fantasies for years centered around choking a woman, making her beg for her life, and pretend rape. So his fantasy was to have her beg no. And she generally was willing to go along with that. So it was a much easier step for him once he decided he had to get rid of her, because it also happened to satisfy one of his fantasies. First responders found Birchmore in a seated position with a strap around her neck and the doorknob. Dr. William Smock determined, so this is the medical examiner, that Birchmore's death. I'm sorry. This is the medical examiner hired by the feds, I believe. The family also hired a medical examiner, but I believe this is the one, I think that was Bader, but this is the one hired by the feds. So Smock determined that Birchmore's death was a homicide. She cited Birchmore's hyoid bone fracture, the patent imprint injury on her chest, and also abrasions to her nose and the broken necklace, among other evidence. Now, it's interesting because, so you always see this, like with Epstein, they talk about the hyoid thing, but there is a little bit more of an explanation to it here. And so we'll get to it. So first, all right. So on February 9th, Farble used his work cell phone to make and delete 2 Google searches. So this is a week after. He searched for and deleted, can messages be recovered by Celebrite? It meant deleted. Can deleted messages be recovered by Celebrite? So he obviously had deleted messages that were either incriminatory or, or embarrassing, inculpatory, let's call that. So So they were either inculpatory or they were embarrassing. And he wanted to know if Celebrite, the extraction tool, could recover them. And he also searched, can you revoke consent in Massachusetts? Because he had granted the state police limited consent to search his phone. And they also highlight a bunch of lies that he told state police. So Falwell had sent Birchmore text messages stating that he would grab her throat, pin her down by her throat, squeeze her throat, or choke her during sexual activity. For example, less than 4 months before her death, he told Birchmore that during their sexual encounter, he was going to grab her throat and say, "Shut the fuck up. Now, shut the fuck up now, or I won't pull out." Another message from November said, "Maybe I'll hold you down by your throat while I pound you." He then reflected on how tight he should squeeze, texting that he wanted her to feel, "Oh my God, this is really happening. I can't stop it." So his fantasy involved choking her to death. He wanted to make sure she was comfortable with it, but that was still his fantasy. Additionally, text messages between him and Birchmore's own journal entries reveal his efforts to punish her with violent sex acts. This violent sexual punishment started as early as 2013. So he's a dangerous guy who had fantasies along that line, and that was always part of their relationship. Now, I don't know what was actually in the diaries, the journals, but there's one of the things, if you're looking at should the state police have had that, the answer is obviously yes. The state police might not have been able to get certain communications that the feds got from iCloud, but they definitely had that. Was that enough? Farwell asked Birchmore on multiple occasions to act as if he was raping her when they had sex. For example, he told Birchmore that he enjoyed having sex with her, and Birchmore asked, well, what would be perfect for him? And he replied, "You say no and make me take it." Birchmore's journals detail the violences, just repeating it, that he suffered. His iCloud account contained images that confirm his interest in domestic and sexual violence. And so what they describe are memes. And it doesn't say here, but I believe that one of the things that I had read when researching the Delphi murder case was that when you delete texts that you have made, and when I say text, it could be a phone text, but it could be like a Facebook text, or any similar program. And you could even be using one of those programs like Yellow or Yahoo or whatever it's called now, and where it's kind of like a dating app where the texts delete after a certain amount of time, or like Signal, which is what Karen used. But one of the things that I learned was that images are harder to delete. You can delete them, but a record is maintained on the server. So it's easier to recover images than the actual text. So a meme, I believe, is an image. It's, you know what they are, right? And you see kind of like a poster or a photo, and then it has some kind of text on it. So this seems to be what they recovered here. So there was a meme containing a photo of a woman with tape over her mouth that states, "Duct tape turning, no, into since 1942. So celebrating using duct tape. Another one said, when she says, "Choke me, daddy," and you get carried away, and now she's dead. And there was something here where he did seem to want her to call him daddy. Well, we know who else does that, right? But a screenshot of an image of a woman saying that she could not sleep, followed by a man choking her saying, "Good night, bitch." I mean, these are horrible things. These apparently float around the internet as jokes or whatever. I've never seen them, but He had these. He saved these. A meme glorifying a person who kills and sexually abuses someone who no one will miss. So they argue that Farwell is a danger to children. Obviously he is. Scroll down a little more. He obviously would be a flight risk. There's no way this guy's going to. And I think that's what this whole document was to argue that he should not be released on bail. Also remains a risk for obstruction. Conclusion, based upon the foregoing, the government has met its burden to show that no conditions of release will reasonably assure the defendant's appearance, the safety of any person or the community, or the integrity of this proceeding. Accordingly, the government requests that the court order the defendant detained pending trial. The government further requests that if the court is inclined to release the defendant on conditions, it stay its order for such time to permit the government to file a motion for revocation of the order of release. This is signed by Josh Levy. And the assistant. So Josh Levy said in his press conference yesterday, he likes press conferences, and he said that there are 150 assistant prosecutors in the Boston office. So when I heard that, I'm like, so you got 150 prosecutors on your team, but yet you yourself did something unprecedented and became in the first instance that anybody knows of, a U.S. attorney actually questioning witnesses in a grand jury. And that took place in the Karen Reed case. Again, I say this is extremely unusual. There's something that smells here. If the Karen Reed case was just a matter of Josh Levy being convinced that there was something worth investigating here, we're going to do due diligence, fine. But there's no way that he would be directly involved like that and actually doing the questioning. It never happened. I talked to someone else who worked, I don't want to say his position, but worked with federal prosecutors for decades and said, never heard of it. Never heard of it in 40 years of anything similar. Why? Was the Karen Reed case more important to him than this case? The murder of a 23-year-old girl who had been groomed and raped from when she was 15? Why didn't he question the witnesses in this case? Maybe he did. I don't actually know, but I'd be shocked to see that he did. What he did was unique in the Karen Reed case, and it feels corrupt. And again, you have to always distinguish. So the FBI agents who did this investigation did, from everything we're seeing here, an outstanding job, and they are extremely important and valued public servants. And there's going to be a mix of that on any team, right? So while Birchmore was in the program, Farwell was involved as both a volunteer and an instructor. So it's hard. So maybe he was involved before he was on the Stoughton Police as a volunteer. I don't know. There are signs that in late 2020 and early 2021, Farwell was losing control of Birchmore and the information she possessed about his past and then ongoing conduct. And that we'll see more of that. So we'll get back to that. Scrolling down. All right. On February 11th, 2020. So this is a year before her death. Birchmore and Farwell discussed the exact day that he took her when she was 15. I don't think we need to get into this. Just that it proves that It happened. Statutory rape. She was very willing, and according to the text, had been eyeing him for a lot longer. But again, she's a kid. And a very vulnerable kid with no male figures in her life. It's my understanding she was being raised by her mother and grandmother. On October 5th, 2020, Birchmore, so this is where it starts to build towards the murder motive. Birchmore prepared a draft message to Farwell's wife. She sent this draft to Farwell and states in part, I am just messaging to inform you that your husband, Matthew, has been out cheating on you since before you guys were even married. So she was blackmailing him at that point to get what she wanted. At one point, Farwell asked her to pretend that she was a 14-year-old girl during their next sexual encounter. One time he described pinning her down and he asked her, will you say, he wants her to say, Matt, stop, I'm 13. So his fantasies were all about raping little girls. My God, even if this guy didn't kill Birchmore, and we're going to see that he did, this guy should never be out on the street. I have also received several text messages from 2020 in which Farwell instructs Birchmore to act as if he were her older brother coming into a room at night to have sex with her. She used to meet as a freshman in high school. He would meet with Birchmore at the library, pretending or helping her with a homework or something. I may be helping her too, but so he probably did help her a little bit, said, according to this I'm reading here. But still, very inappropriate. He's 12 years older than her. So she's 13, 14, 15. He's, 25, 26, 27, and meeting a little girl at the library. He says, I wish it had been a year sooner. And you know what we're talking about. He says he would have been with her in 2012. I don't know. Maybe she was 13 at that point. Oh, boy. So another witness indicated that she had been meeting Farwell when she was in early high school, to have sex with him in his police car. I hate reading these things out. I don't know. I'm probably going to get a strike on YouTube just for reading a document too. Damn. So his wife was, so it was October when Farwell told Birchmore that his wife was pregnant and was due in February. And as it turns out, was born the day after Birchmore died. On that October 5th, indicate that Birchmore presented Farwell with an ultimatum. Farwell would have to agree to engage in unprotected sex with Birchmore with the goal of conceiving a child. And in return, Birchmore would not disclose their relationship. She sent Farwell a photo of her ovulation schedule, and the two started discussing timing their sexual encounters around specific times in that cycle. And he seems to have been losing interest. And so his agreement was that they would try once. So, you know, he's acting like if I make a deal with you, we both have to live up with it as though it's a contract. But she's not going to stick to that unless she gets what she wants. So kind of stupid on, I don't know. She says, how would you feel about us having a baby, you being there and signing the birth certificate? There's never going to be a need for your information anyway, so you'll be safe there. And I won't talk shit about her to your kids. So she wants to make sure this child has the father on the birth certificate. And then she says, in exchange, I'll make sure that I don't tell your wife and kids. But, you know, he's going to be living in that fear that one time she's going to be mad or not get what she wants. And she's going to destroy him. So she's playing with fire and doesn't understand it. I don't really know why, but you asked the other day what I wanted, and I didn't want to give it to you in the form of an ultimatum. So I'm trying to do it with you as a compromise type of thing. This is bad negotiation because it's so she's really trying to push him to agree to sign the birth certificate. So on December 28th, so things are building to a head. So this is only a month before her death. She sends Farwell a text message informing him that she was pregnant. She sent him a photo of a poster that she had made to celebrate it. She was 3.5 weeks pregnant at that time. And she's insistent the birth certificate is being signed. And then she gets mad. I'm mad that you're acting how you are over a choice. And she puts in caps, a choice we both made. But, you know, it's not really a choice when you're blackmailing someone into doing it. And he says, I'm mad you act like you gave anyone a choice. He says, per usual, you make and do whatever you want. She just was just a stupid kid still at 23. I mean, she doesn't understand. It's so like you wish you could go back in time and make her see like you're playing with fire, kid. You're playing with fire. So he says for the past week and half, the doctor wasn't right, but now she was, and you just throw it at me because now you've got me. You've honestly have absolutely no idea how to treat people. I have fucking bent over backwards for you. Now you want to act like this was some kind of a free will decision. You have threatened me from the word go. If I didn't do and give you what you wanted, you would ruin me. I made a deal with you and you changed the terms at every turn. So she just didn't realize the danger she was in with this. It made me really uncomfortable and stressed out and scared when you were next to me because I thought you were going to hit me. Oh, I'm sorry, this is Sandra saying that. So maybe she says it made me really uncomfortable and stressed out and scared when you were next to me because I thought you were going to hit me. And you said what you said and took things out of my hand. That's why I was crying. I know you wouldn't, but it still scared me. So he's someone that has not, it's from the sounds of it, been violent with her all that much in their previous, all these years, but has fantasies about violence. And she was in tremendous danger. Just thought she could control the situation. So at one point, she told a friend that Farwell told her that after he found out she was pregnant, he said to Sandra, I wish she would just die, and he wants nothing to do with the baby. At one point, he put her in a headlock and grabbed her cell phone. And then this witness indicated that in the days before her death, Birchmore disclosed that he'd been violent. So she's excited about the pregnancy, buying baby strollers, shopping for kids' baby stuff. And according to the friend of Sandra's, with all this going on, when she showed him a fetal sonogram, he supposedly said, that's not my child. I don't want anything really to do with you. And then he pushed her to the ground. Another friend said that something similar, that he got upset and shoved her. Another time, he took her cell phone out of her hands and refused to give it back, took her computer, and used his body to shove her. So we already see that she's wanted him to sign the birth certificate, but then on January 3rd, she says, so I have a compromise for you. You don't need to sign the birth certificate if the baby can have your last name. And he says, we can talk in person. Obviously, he's not going to do that. I see there's several times that she uses the word they and talking about the baby. And I don't know. At first, I was thinking, is there twins or is she planning future ones? But maybe that's a pronoun thing because she doesn't know if it's a boy or a girl. I'm still not fully hip to all the pronoun use of nowadays. So she says, I won't bitch about holidays, but I would like you to come a few days before Christmas and Easter so you can see what they get from me. And I don't want you to leave them out. And 3, if you want to try and support them, we can talk about that. But I do want you to see them. So she's willing to accept being number 2 in his life, but she wants to be number 2. She wants to remain a part of his life and have a kind of side family, be a side family for him. And she wanted him there for the labor. And that, she says, I'm standing my ground on. That and the last name. All right, so on January 20th, so 10 days before, a friend of hers called the Stoughton Police Department and referenced the sexual relationship between Birchmore and Farwell. After learning about this call, the fact of which suggested at least some aspects of Farwell's illicit conduct may have been exposed to the Stoughton police. So, you know, we know that was true, I believe, because that's why he got fired not long after this. But yeah, there was some level of exposure there. And interesting that the feds chose to include that here. So that's obviously part of their investigation. Farwell sent Birchmore text messages revealing his extreme anger. He sent her a series of text messages with expletives telling her that he thought no one knew about the relationship, that she had no clue how bad this was, indicating that he does not know if he needs to worry about other disclosures. I don't know how this guy could be so naive as to think she never tells anybody. That seems crazy to me, but I don't know. So he says, dude, your fucking friend called my job. Sandra, what the fuck? Your friend just called me, my fucking work, asking to complain about me. What do you mean you don't know? He says, I literally just woke up. Did you steal from her? No. What's going on? You also told me that no one knew about us, what she claimed, and that we're fucking. And Birchmore says it's literally nothing. So he says it's not nothing. She called my job. He says, why would she call and drop my fucking name, Sandra? Like, what do I have to do with you not giving her some? What do I have? Oh, okay. He says, like, what do I have to do with you not giving her something? So it sounds like Sandra's friend, Sandra owed her something. And when she didn't give it to her, she got back at Sandra by calling the police and telling them about the relationship. Farwell says, I literally can't believe this is even real life. Like, what else do I have to worry about now? What other friend will do something tomorrow? So during the investigation, the FBI agent interviewed person 5, an employee of the Stoughton Police Department who received the call from the friend. And this employee of the police indicated he took down the name of the friend and information and gave it to Farwell. And he indicated that Farwell immediately got angry and pissed off and ordered that Stoughton employee not to speak about this to anyone and to never talk about it again. So I don't know if this employee was a cop, right? Is it someone who takes the calls at Stoughton Police? So one of the things that we learned in the Karen Reed trial is that in the town of Canton, which I would guess is probably similar size to Stoughton. I don't know. I haven't looked up the population. Smaller police department than the big cities, right? And so they do not have 911 dispatchers. The police do it themselves. So somebody on duty they're all taught how to be the dispatch officer, and that's part of their duties. And so every one of them can man the phone if necessary. And somebody is always assigned to it. So I don't know if that's the case in Stoughton. So what other employees are in there that aren't, if this was Canton, the person that took the call would have been another cop, would have been a Canton police officer. I don't know if that's how it works in Stoughton, but you wonder if it might be. So so this person number 5, as the FBI describes it, is that a cop? So talking about the fact that he had recently asked for the key. Is that good or bad? The person said, and Sandra said, good, but unexpected. So it kind of threw me off and made me a little uncomfortable, but that's because of how things were going. So he'd been very distant and worried because of what she was doing to him and the pregnancy and all that stuff. All of a sudden it's a 180 and he's asking for a key to be made. So she was suspicious, rightly so. He asked me if I'd give him a key and said that if I keep it a secret, he'll be around and see them and all that. So it's somewhere. Then he looked in my closet and in the bathroom, but I don't know why. I haven't figured that out. So she found it suspicious what he was doing. So the FBI agent says, based on his experience, that this shift in demeanor on or about this date was his attempt to appease Birchmore until he could kill her. And that, I have to agree with that conclusion. He also she gave him the passcode to the building. Back in October of 2020, Farwell had told her that it was not a good idea for him to keep a key keep a key to her new apartment, which was in Canton. So something had changed. And she talked to someone else, same thing about being surprised about that. But then he did admit that Birchmore says that Farwell admitted that I do have the upper hand in the situation, which isn't a good thing, but I'm trying to and not be that person, if you know what I mean. So she's trying to use the leverage she has without seeming to him like she's trying to pressure him. And then she talks again to this friend, like last night he opened my closet door for something, and then he went into the bathroom looking at my bathroom, and then I have a dolly in my living room, and he asked why I had it. And it was just really odd that he started looking around, and I don't know. And the friend said, that's weird. And she said, yeah, it's really weird. So she noticed. She noticed. On February 1st, the day of her death, she is seen on the video at approximately 5:01 p.m. Accepting DoorDash. She goes out briefly and returns with a snow brush at 5:31 and 5:33, respectively. So she's back in by 5:33. The last time Birchmore is seen alive on the video is at 5:33. That's when she comes back with the snow brush. At approximately 9:08, Farwell sent Birchmore a text message asking whether he could come by for a second. At approximately 9:10, Birchmore sent Farwell a text message indicating that when he arrived at her apartment, the door would be open for him. And this is the last known outgoing message that she'd ever sent. Interesting that it says last known. Why doesn't it say last? Is that an implication that he could have deleted messages? I don't know why I would say it that way. I don't know, because you got to be careful when you word things. When you word things, most of this document is written well, but I'm not sure by putting known, because why wouldn't they know? I don't know. Well, I guess the implication is the police could have deleted it, right? I don't know. Surveillance video shows Farwell entering Birchmore's Canton apartment at 9:14. And then the surveillance shows he left her apartment at 9:43. Again, we've showed that video of him getting on and then off the library. So he's there a half hour. Then on February 4th, so she's killed on the 1st. On February 4th, the police officers conducted a well-being check, and that's when they found her, her body seated on the floor in a reclined position with a duffel bag strap tied around her neck. That strap was connected to her closet doorknob, the closet that Farwell had inspected approximately 1 week earlier. At least one first responder quickly concluded that she'd been deceased for days. She was wearing the same clothing that was last seen on the surveillance. Now, this is the key evidence. This is the smoking gun evidence. This is really, truly smoking gun evidence. Her cell phone was found on the floor, located approximately 12 inches from her right hand and 6 inches from her bent right knee. And we'll come back to that cell phone. You'll see in a moment why it's a smoking gun. A log report indicates that the phone, okay, maybe we'll see it right now. The log report indicates that the phone was locked from 9:13 until the device powered off because of battery loss on February 3rd. So 9:13 is when she would have texted him, I think, to let him in or something. So on February 1st, while still locked, Birchmore's phone recorded a screenshot of a black screen at 9:18. In other words, after sending a final text message to Farwell to tell him the door was unlocked, Birchmore's phone locked and was not unlocked ever again, well, until the police had it. Now, this is the key data. Now, people get messed up around data. Some data is extremely solid, more than solid. It's rock solid. It depends on the nature of it. So if I call you at 11:15 in the morning, and then later on somebody gets the phone bill, that is accurate data. That's not going to be off. Now, could somebody possibly make an argument the phone company was somehow off by a few seconds? Maybe. But it's pretty accurate. Other types of data are more open to interpretation. That's just shouldn't be that hard to understand. But so according to, all right, so the health app data. So we saw this before with John O'Keefe's phone, in the Karen Reed case, and a little bit with Jen McCabe. So the health app data, the health data on Birchmore's phone indicates that the last movement recorded by the phone occurred at 9:40 p.m. Now that's 3 minutes before Farwell was captured on surveillance video leaving Birchmore's apartment. Now, the reason this is a smoking gun, you could maybe hypothetically argue that if that phone was on the table, on the bed, whatever, even on the couch, you could argue that after he left, she killed herself at some point and she was so distraught from what he said or whatever that she never went and got her phone. But because it was found on the floor right next to her body, that's what makes it a smoking gun. I mean, I can't really imagine any scenario where that phone ends up so let's say you want to try to argue the same thing, that Farwell said something so bad to her that not long after she left, she decided she wanted to kill herself. But that phone was already in the place where it would never move again. And what are the odds that she is going to kill herself in that very same place without picking up the phone, without kicking it? It's just not plausible. It's just not plausible. So to me, this is a smoking gun. When I say smoking gun, beyond a reasonable doubt. I can't, maybe someone can give me an explanation that I can't think of, but I can't think of any explanation as to how that phone would be unmoved on the floor right next to where she is found. So now, why did Farwell leave the phone there? We don't know. And maybe he didn't want his fingerprints on it, right? Can't say for sure. Maybe he didn't even notice it. If his fantasy was to kill somebody violently in a rape fantasy, he may, we don't know. But he also, we don't know where she was killed. The feds are saying that she was staged there. So was she killed in that spot? Probably not. She was a tiny girl. He's a very big dude. He probably, had sex with her, killed her, and dragged her to that spot. So did he stage the phone there? I don't know. I mean, it would have been smarter to put it in her hand, right? Or put it in her pocket. But we don't know. But, even though we don't know, and it's intriguing to wonder and try to understand how that went down, but there's no way that phone could have stopped moving on the floor next to where she's found, and he's still there. There's just no way. Let's see. So Apple, the data indicates that the phone registered 8 steps at approximately 9:40. These recorded steps occurred while he was still in Birchmore's apartment. The phone recorded no additional steps. So the phone moved to that spot at 9:40. Did he move it there when he moved her body there? I don't know. It's interesting. Why would he do that? I don't know. It's weird. It almost suggests to me that where he killed her was right more or less there. But I don't know. I'd be curious to see how this goes. She'd been in the middle of doing her laundry when she died, so that's evidence that she had no intention to kill herself. I don't know how strong that evidence is, though, because she obviously had no intention before this, but in theory, he comes in and he says something so bad she wants to kill herself. But so to me, that's not very compelling evidence, but there's enough other compelling evidence that really is not important to me. So we got to get into evidence of why this is where a lot of this case is going to hinge on. Why did the medical examiner originally conclude that there was suicide? And what evidence do they look at now, the federal, the medical examiner used by the feds, that says no? So we'll get into that a little bit here. So the necklace that belonged to Birchmore was lying on the floor of her bedroom. This necklace consisted of a thin gold chain with a pink flamingo charm. I mean, just very sad to think this is obviously something that was a very sentimental possession of hers. And the family members observed that the necklace's chain was broken, but not at the clasp. So that suggested it was violently taken off her neck. There was also a large clump of hair on the chain. Can't really think of any innocent explanation for that. So the autopsy said, from my review of the crime scene photos, I observed that while the strap was still around Birchmore's neck, the necklace was broken and hanging from the left side of her neck. So it was the family that found it on the floor, but the way the police first, when they got there, the crime scene photos seemed to show that the neck was there, that the necklace was on her neck still. So it came off as part of moving the body, part of the police moving the body. The necklace's charm was on the right side of her abdomen. So the necklace was broken and hanging from the left side, but the charm was on the right side. So the autopsy on the body. So the medical examiner, the original one, ruled Birchmore's manner of death a suicide. She said that, or I don't know if it's a she or a written autopsy report noted that Birchmore's hyoid bone, a U-shaped bone in the front of the neck, was fractured on the right side, and that she suffered from, I'm probably not going to say this right, but petechial hemorrhages of the bulbar and palpebral conjunctivae. Wow. Good thing I didn't go to medical school. Additionally, the medical examiner concluded that Birchmore had a hemorrhage of her left sternothyroid muscle. The medical examiner's report further confirmed that Birchmore was approximately 8 to 10 weeks pregnant. The autopsy included toxicology testing, which was negative for all substances. Now, they would do that, so except for sertraline, which was an antidepressant that she was on, which does show there is a little bit of mental health issue there, right? But the question here is, why do they do the toxicology test but not the test to find out who the father was? That I don't know. But one of the things that we're going to have to look at here is, once the medical examiner rules that this is a suicide, incorrectly, but in this case, once she rules that it's a suicide, that actually handcuffs the investigators, because now it becomes really hard for them to get warrants or to order tests even. So that may explain some of the actions that don't happen that should have happened. May explain. I don't know. Again, I'm not a lawyer. I'm not an investigator. I'm giving this a very amateur, superficial look at it. So that may explain, though, why some of the tests that we think are common sense that should have been run maybe legally could not have been once it was ruled a suicide. As part of the investigation, the government retained Dr. William Smock to independently review the crime scene photos, autopsy photos, and the medical examiner's autopsy report. So this is like when Josh Levy hired ARCA and the Karen Reed case. Except in that case, they didn't give the vehicle data. So the equivalent here would be if you hired Dr. Smock but didn't give him the autopsy photos. To me, that's the equivalent. That's why there's something wrong in that case. And even if that vehicle data, the tech stream data, was not obtained until a couple of months after the feds initially contracted with ARCA, the trial was more than a year and a half later. It was plenty of time to make sure they got that data. And those ARCA guys would have said, where's the tech stream data? Because they're experts in it, and they knew that that data is part of Lexus. In fact, they could have been called in to help the state and say, hey, because Trooper Paul was not familiar with TechStream. He was not trained on TechStream. He was trained on a lot of other things, but not TechStream. But the ARCA guys were. So they should have had, the feds should have had ARCA work with Trooper Paul. But they weren't interested in the truth. All right. Dr. Smock concluded that the fracture of the right superior horn of Birchmore's hyoid bone is not consistent with the position in which first responders found her. So this is always the key. You know, when this is common, like with the Epstein case where an outside expert comes in and says the hyoid bone was broken, and this shows that it was not a suicide. But there are cases where the hyoid bone is broken and it is suicide. So what he is explained here, Dr. Smock, is that a sitting hanging is called an incomplete hanging. That's the reference to it, meaning only partial body weight is applied to the neck. Smock's review of hundreds of cases of hangings in the forensic medical literature found no reported cases of hyoid bone fractures in seated women. All right, so this means the hyoid bone fracture is much more plausible if it's someone that, say, hung from a tree. So they have the full weight. And it's also somewhat more plausible if it's a seated hanging and it's a man. Apparently those happen. But there's no examples of it happen with a woman. Maybe because a woman is not as strong or as heavy. But obviously, I guess you could take from that having the hyoid bone break in the case of a sitting hanging is not impossible, but would be rare enough that there's no examples of it happening with a woman. So, so he says fractures of the hyoid bone are more commonly seen in strangulation assaults and in hangings with full body weight, but not in seated hangings. So ignoring for the moment the rest of the case, could there be reasonable doubt there? Maybe. But this is why I say, like, things have to work. Evidence like this, probability multiplies together. So if the only evidence is on this case is that the hyoid bone was broken, then maybe you say, well, there's a 1% chance that in a seated hanging, that for a woman, the hyoid bone would break. And so therefore it still could be a suicide. I'm making that number up. But then when you look at all the other things, you multiply it together. So let's say there's a 1% chance of that, but then there's something else in here that's extremely unlikely, such as the phone issue. So maybe now you get to 1 in 1,000, 1 in a million chances, things like that. There's more, though. The patent imprint was on her upper right chest. This was the consequence of a buckle or buckles from the strap being forced downward onto her chest. So it sounds like he didn't kill her with his hands, bare hands. He used the strap. The presence of this pattern imprint is not consistent with hanging. So if you were hanging yourself, you wouldn't get that pressure that may from the belt thing, the buckle, in order to make an imprint. Rather, the presence of the pattern is consistent with blunt force trauma from an assault. When first responders found her body, the buckle responsible for this imprint was observed just below her right ear. However, the location of the imprint on her chest is not consistent with an incomplete ligature hanging, with a seated hanging. So, those are things I'm sure a good defense attorney could try to take apart a little bit. And that's what they do. That's their job, right? But I think that it sounds like Smock is making a logical conclusion, an informed conclusion. He also further reviewed the photos depict Birchmore with areas of skin missing from the inferior and lateral aspects of her nose, consistent with abrasions. So these were maybe not that easy to spot, but there were some type of abrasions on the nose. And these types of injuries are commonly seen in cases of suffocation when the victim moves back and forth to try to breathe. It's just horrible to, like I said, this is not fun stuff. The breaking of Birchmore's chain necklace is consistent with a struggle. In addition, moving on, Farwell made a bunch of false statements. 13 hours after Birchmore was killed, Farwell's third child was born at Newton Wellesley Hospital. Farwell told detectives that Birchmore had been sectioned, meaning taken Section 12, many times. That's not true. There was one call where somebody was worried about her, and she had been in a fight with a family member, and she called the police and reported that Birchmore was going to harm herself. The police took Birchmore to the hospital, where she was evaluated and deemed not at risk of self-harm. She told a friend that she was not suicidal, just angry at the family member. So there's a little bit of evidence here. Very troubled life. On depression, on antidepressant medication. Did have one wellness check and a brief Section 12. But other than that, there's no evidence that I've seen of her ever talking about suicide. Oh, I take that back. Well, there is evidence that indicates that Birchmore may have had suicidal ideations on a few occasions between 2016 and 2018, which Farwell likely knew about because he was exploiting her during that time. I am not aware of credible evidence of any suicidal ideations in the approximately 3 years leading up to her death. So in that time, I think that's when she was in high school, right? So 4 years. That's the period, I think, where their mother and grandmother died. Following her death, the Stoughton Police Department placed Farwell on administrative leave. More evidence that Farwell had asked her to help perform rape fantasies. He initiated the concept of choking Birchmore on several occasions. So even a year before, so before he was thinking about killing her, he had fantasies where he enlisted her help, where he pins her down and squeezes her by the throat as part of their sexual activity. In fact, all the way back to when she was only 16 years old, he introduced the idea of choking during their sexual encounters. So here's a guy that fantasizes about early teen girls and about choking them. How did this guy not become a serial killer? Well, it must, people that have those kind of fantasies don't all become serial killers. You don't, part of becoming a serial killer, you can't control your urges to the point where, because most of those guys end up in jail, right, for life. So there's just obvious advantage in trying to control those urges so you don't end up in jail for the rest of your life. There may also be self-image where you don't want to think of yourself as a killer. So, and I can't rule out too that there also would be somebody could still be capable of levels of empathy and caring. He used to punish her sexually for her mistakes, such as getting bad grades. At one point here, he talked about really, we don't want to speculate, but some kind of punishing sex encounters where she's okay with it, but just doesn't want them on the same day because she needs to recover from them. So he says, I'll give you like a week so you can feel it. And then as soon as it goes away, you'll get it again. So you feel it like for a whole month. And she says, not going to be a fun month. And he says, not for you. I mean, a lot of that's fantasy level, but clearly, disturbing things that got him off. When she asked him what would be perfect for him, he replied, you say no and make me take it. Full R word. So R meaning R, and then the rest of the word ape. When Birchmore indicated that she was amenable to that, he says, doesn't matter, I'll do what I want anyways. In another text message, he instructed her to call him daddy during sexual encounters. Again, where have we seen that, right? All right, so I think we've just about reached the all right, so during this investigation, pursuant to a federal search warrant, agents obtained and reviewed data from Farwell's iCloud account. Located in Farwell's iCloud were several memes. Oh, we already mentioned that. All right. So this is just repeating stuff that's already in here. So she knew she wanted him from the moment they made eye contact. All right. All right. So we have finally reached the end of that. Thank God. All right. So I'll go back to the comments. And again, it's depressing to really see this stuff. So for you guys here, thank you for being here. These are difficult things to read. So anybody have any questions? So Sailboat Wolf says, I feel like it might be worthwhile to dig a bit to see if there are any other associations between Farwell and other missing dead young women. He's hitting a lot of the marks for multiple murder. Yeah. That's worth looking into, definitely. He's going to have the worst time ever in jail. Hope so. He might get the death penalty too. This is not a death penalty state, but this is a federal crime at this point that he's charged with. Sailboat says this has been one of the more depressing YCT shows in quite some time. Yeah. Sorry. I don't know. That's why I didn't want to do true crime when I launched this channel. Really didn't. Wanted to go over stories, just checking messages. I don't know. I definitely more like entertaining kind of stories. So Layla says, Kevin, what do you think of the timing of this case? I don't know. I mean, I don't know what we can read into it. You know, we've been getting hints that this might happen, but further down the road. So, but I think, you know, there's always, once you have enough evidence to get the indictment, you have to do it because this guy was dangerous. This guy was dangerous. We go to federal prison. Yeah. You know, I don't know. They're more. They might be cleaner and a little safer, but federal prison. But they're brutal too. They're extra brutal because it's really they have much higher levels of security. Just check into the Discord, see if anybody has any questions. Doesn't look like it. So, you guys have any questions here? I can. I guess this would be slightly more changing the subject. I get to grift a little. Like I said, there's no money in this for me. This is strictly put up because people are asking. It's the first thing I put on here in over a year. So here's the Yellow Cottage Tales shirt that I put up, if you can see that. So that's a AI imagined version of the Boston skyline. And Yellow Cottage Tales in the form of the Hollywood sign, and it says "Standing Against the Mob." So if anybody has an interest in that, you can go to, I don't even know where do we have it, T-shirt something, TeePublic. So Kev, does this arrest make you think that it's all more possible let the McAlbert slide? No, because the evidence is just too bulletproof. As I went over from the start of the show, William, I'm not going to go over all the evidence we've been over here. So the main evidence that is bulletproof is the timeline that correlates the vehicle data with the Waze data on John's phone. But here again today, I just played earlier the video that Karen said last year on the Today Show that she watched John get out of the car she dropped him off the driveway, watched him walk into the house, waited 10 minutes, and then when he didn't come out, in her own words, she texted him and called him. That's a lie. That's a lie. Because we have John's phone. And she didn't text him until 12:55. That's 20, and her phone connected to John's Wi-Fi at 12:36. So she was home almost 20 minutes. So no. J Ray wants to draw us a shirt. Well, you're welcome to draw a shirt, and I'll put it on that account. If you're selling it, you can have the dollar that comes from it, or I can show you how to put them up there. If you're really good at making stuff, maybe you can make a go at it. I tried making the t-shirts. I put a whole bunch of different things up here that I made with AI over a year ago. The channel has expenses. There are things you have to pay for, like the StreamYard is about $50 a month. And the editing from Adobe is another $50 a month. So it's tough that you want to at least try to make up enough money so you're breaking even on it, right? So I figured I would take a shot at telling t-shirts. That didn't work out. So I have not added another t-shirt to it for over a year. It does sell some. I don't even know which ones sell. So, but yeah, you get like $1 or $2 a shirt. It's not any, and I'm selling like 1 or 2 a month. So, but I'll help you do it if you want to find out about it, J Ray. Maybe your art will take off. The zombie graphics. Well, Tom told me no more zombies. Thomas Fleming said no, enough with the zombies. So Maybe we'll bring them out of retirement in a year. So no, I mean, just the evidence against Karen is bulletproof. It's she again. So again, she said that she called, she waited for John, called and texted. That phone data shows that's impossible. She did not text him until 12:55, and the first call was at 12:33, which seems to be almost certain that she was on her way home at that time. I don't think the timing of this had anything to do with the civil case. No, this is, I mean, look, this guy was dangerous. So I think FBI agents were assigned to this, good agents, and good prosecutors that are on that 150-man prosecutor team for the Boston U.S. Attorney. And they knew this guy was dangerous. You got to get him off the streets as soon as you can, as soon as you have enough evidence so you can do it. There's no evidence at this point of any wrongdoing on the part of investigators. I'm not telling you I'm not open to that being found. So you have three general types of possibilities here, right? You have there was some kind of cover up with the Birchmore case. That's one. Two, there was no cover up, no intentional wrongdoing, but it was incompetent. And or three, people more or less did their jobs, but they didn't have the tools the feds did, maybe, or something like that. I don't know. But the other thing, too, is another possibility here is the medical examiner. This is what we have to find out what he or she is going to say, why they concluded it was suicide. Were they pressured in any way? Are they incompetent? I have to say, I didn't really come away in the Karen Reed trial with an impression of competence on the part of that medical examiner, Scotty Borer, Scott, whatever her name was. I didn't come away with an impression of competence. But nor do I come away with an impression of competence from the Norfolk County DA's office. So just exactly where the mistakes are, if it's mistakes, can be difficult. But once she concluded that it was a suicide, that was probably going to stop most investigations. Jay Ray, no, I wasn't implying you needed $1. No, I didn't mean it that way. But you never know. Like if you're gonna make that shirt, that's gonna take. It just may be fun to have people want your work. So feel free to send me what you got. I'll put it up there. Brissett or May, boy, that's the argument of the day, right? And we all listen to it and talk about it. The most important thing on the Patriots team is May's development. The record this year doesn't matter, and really none of the other plays in a lot of ways matter. Don't get me wrong; like Barmore is my favorite player. There's a lot of other players I like, but you can't win championships generally in the NFL without a top-notch quarterback. Everybody knows that. So it's all about May's development. Now, what's best for his development? Is it better to throw him out now? Because not only when you're the starting quarterback, it's not even that you get the starts on Sunday and all that action, but you get in practice all week, you get all the throws. Whereas the backup quarterback only gets a handful. So it's really limiting your ability to develop. But the question is if you take May out there and he goes out and the offensive line stinks, which it does right now, is he going to be seeing ghosts for the next couple of years and not develop any sense of confidence? This is the kind of thing that the Jets traditionally have done with their quarterbacks, and that's why they've stunk for so long. They draft a guy, first pick, second pick, and they put him out there start him week 1 with a shitty offensive coordinator and shitty offensive line, and the guy's a basket case by the end of year 2, if not by the end of year 1, and they never recover. So it's whatever is best for May. So we have a tough schedule in the first week, 4 tough games. I think there's enough talent on the offensive line that right now it needs to be coached up and get on the same page. If that happens, the offensive line might start feeling better by the looking reasonably solid by the end of September. Then maybe you could go with May, depending on what the situation is. Ann says Karen didn't mean to kill John. The cop wanted to kill Sandra. Absolutely, I agree with that. We'll never know, right? But I don't believe there's evidence that shows intent on the part of Karen Reed. As David Yannetti once said, my client had no intent. Lori ordered it. We got a T-shirt sale. Thank you, Lori. I need one of those shirts. I like that little poster. So on Karen's civil case, the judge ordered on Tuesday that all info needed to be released to all parties. All right, so interesting. This is something, I talked about this recently, but there are some people that don't believe me. The suing of Karen Reed by the O'Keefe family has nothing to do with money. Nothing. Scotty Bello. Thank you, Jerry. Nothing. It has to do with getting justice and accountability in a way that so far the criminal system has failed. And there are certain tools that are open in a civil. It's easier to get discovery, and you can force the defendant to take the stand as a witness in her own case. Now, she may plead the fifth on certain things, but I mean, there are just certain things that can happen here that can be very helpful to getting the truth out. They may not necessarily help lead to a conviction, but at least helpful at making, which is getting the truth out is a favor that the O'Keefes are doing for the Alberts and the McCabe's and everybody else that's falsely accused in this case. So getting the truth out is something they're doing for those families. And that's the motive. Nunya wants to go with Brissett until the kid sees the speed of the game. Yeah, the speed of the game is important, and it's so different in the regular season, right, Nunya? I like that you're referencing the speed of the game. That's a really good point. Just like in the NBA, once you get the speed really changes from preseason to regular season, but then it really takes a jump going into the postseason. Chick from the Bricks likes Mac Jones. I think they ruined him, and I wouldn't have traded him. But we don't know what the locker room presence was, so. We do need to start in left tackle. That'll be the next thing, and maybe that's what they'll have to draft in the first round next year, which will probably be a pretty high pick. Sandra's civil case. Oh, I'm sorry, Star. I wasn't sure what you were talking about. Yeah, there is a civil case there. And so, but same arguments that may drive more information. J. Ray, yes. Okay. William says Mac Jones is going to thrive in Jacksonville. I hope so. You want to see people succeed. Nunya misses Bill's enthusiasm. So did you hear Bill Belichick took over Tom Brady's job for the Tom Brady podcast? It's not called that. but Tom Brady owns a big podcast and he has to step aside to do Fox 25 or whatever. So they hired Bill to take his place, if I understood that story right. Have I spoken to Mahoney about the O'Keefe's civil case? Yes. I still kind of speak to him every few days. So some of what you hear me talking about, I'm not going to distinguish it because the things I get wrong, I'll take the blame for those. But some of what you hear me talking about comes from having consulted with Kevin. But again, I'm not a lawyer, so I won't get some of that stuff. I won't get right, or I won't have the right terminology. So, J. Ray, peace out. Thank you. So another article that came up. Let me pull this up. This was more on Sandra Birchmore. This was in the Boston Globe yesterday. And this points to some problems potentially with the investigation. Independent forensic pathologist questions whether DNA or other testing was done in the Sandra Birchmore case. Investigators took her clothing and biological material from her body for a sexual assault kit and preserved fetal tissue because she was pregnant. But more than 3 years later, a forensic pathologist hired by her family questioned whether the samples were ever tested. This is Dr. Michael Baden, who's a pretty famous guy. So at this point, it says the Norfolk District Attorney's Office, the state police, and the office of the chief medical examiner, who are all assigned to the case, so far have declined to say whether the samples singled out by Dr. Baden have been tested. Given the connections between Birchmore and the 3 former Stoughton police officers she met through the youth program, the lack of testing of the samples as alleged by Baden does not seem to fit with any standard practices that I am familiar with, said Dunja Perkins, a former state prosecutor who now practices law privately in Dedham. It screams red flag, Perkins said. So it certainly does to us civilians, and it does to this lawyer. But again, what we don't know is, I've been advised by lawyers that once the medical examiners determined that it was a suicide, it really handcuffed ordering of tests. So Baden questioned the forensic testing in Birchmore's case last week in a letter summarizing his review of her autopsy. Writing for the Birchmore estate, he determined her death was a homicide, contradicting earlier findings by state investigators who said she killed herself and that no foul play was involved. And this came out right before the indictments, like hours. So Farwell was not only a police detective, he was the patrolmen's union president. And his brother William was also fired as a result of this, as was Robert Devine, a former deputy chief in Stoughton, who led the department's youth program. I've already mentioned him. Trying to be careful. He's a lawyer. I don't want to get sued, so I'm just only going to mention things that are in the Globe. All 3 resigned from the department in 2022, and they deny the allegations in the civil suit. They didn't respond Wednesday to requests for comment. The lawsuit also accuses Matthew Farwell of having sex with birth. All right, so we've already seen all this. Records show that the state police asked Farwell to provide a DNA sample in 2021, and he declined. So they were investigating it, right? Why did they not go the distance they needed to? What stopped them? And, would paternity, if they proved that he was the father, would that have made a difference? Because technically, if she committed suicide, it wouldn't have, right? So I don't know. On Wednesday, a spokesperson, this is interesting. So on Wednesday, a spokesperson for the state medical examiner's office said in an email that testing by the agency is focused on ascertaining cause and manner of death or the identity of the decedent, not in this case, but the medical examiner collects evidence to preserve for uses by other agencies. So there's a lot of buck passing being going on here, right? So they're saying they collected that evidence, but that's not stuff they test because they're just focusing on identifying the person if necessary and then learning the manner of death. It says it doesn't routinely perform tests that go beyond their role of determining cause and manner. Decisions about whether to perform additional testing are made by the district attorneys or police working for them. So, all right, well, been a long show. Let me just check real quick and make sure I didn't miss a question. Any last question before I call it a night? Smitty says, can we do a live stream with Jennifer Coffenaffer discussing Ellen Greenberg and Sandra Birchmore? Yeah, I thought about that same kind of connection too. There's Ellen Greenberg was accused of stabbing herself to death, committing suicide, and many people believe that she was murdered by her fiance. And I believe the last I saw Jen Coffenaffer, I don't want to put words in her mouth, but she definitely finds the investigation suspicious, if not more than that. So I'd be willing to do that. I have to, it forces me to take, I've just been so busy because I'm working on a book for the Karen Reed case, and I'd like to get it done before the trial. And there's a lot of interesting and stuff comes up every day related to that. So in a way, the investigation on my end continues, but, so I've been avoiding going and reading all those documents. I mean, it would probably take me a couple of weeks to get through all the documents in the Ellen Greenberg case. I would like to do it, but if I'm going to be able to talk about it with Jennifer, I do have to do that. So, but it would be an interesting show, and I think it's a good idea, and it would be interesting to compare those things. So as a general rule, I support it. Think it's a good idea. Star says the problem with testing is if it was done. Oh, let me take. Sorry, I forgot to entertain you with my face. The problem with testing is if it was done, is that Matt and his brother, from what I understand, are identical twins. All right. Now, there are fewer tests that can be done, but they're expensive. And, I'm not sure at this point it's even necessary. It's only because we have the text messages that show it was his kid. I don't know. And there's enough evidence to show that he committed the murder because he's the one that she could destroy. He's the one that slept with her when she was underage. He's the one who she could get him in trouble, get charges pressed against him, get him fired, and destroy his family. So I don't know. Fightbot says it seems like we need to change the rule that the medical examiners are the gatekeepers of investigations. The Ellen Greenberg case is another example. Yeah, I'm up for anything. Do you need second opinion? Is there a certain type of case where you should automatically get a second opinion? Would that make sense? I don't know. It does seem like there's something that could be addressed there. Coffenaffer finds that the investigation is suspicious, but not the Karen Reed case. Yeah, absolutely. William, why would that baffle you? Each case is different. Each case is unique. This is what I don't understand, where people, because they see something in one case, they assume they're all like that. I don't really understand that. Every situation is unique. I mean, Farwell had a very clear and understandable motive. No one did in the Karen Reed case, including Karen. No one had a motive to kill John O'Keefe. Nobody even close to that. All right, guys. Well, last question. Thomas, if I missed it before, what kind of ice cream did you have? Because I'm going to go have some coffee ice cream. Chick from the Bricks, before you take off, people want me to do another blueberry. All right. Chick from the Bricks, people want me to do another one of those timeline graphics, but this one would be to show the impossibility, or at least the implausibility, of planting evidence. So Kerry had asked me for that too. Actually, several people have. And Kerry, so I have all that information memorized. So I just listed it to her in an email. But so I wonder if you could maybe me and you should work on making. So you're the one that's excellent with the graphic design, and I can give you the information, and maybe you can make something similar to what we had on the other one that you made, which was really good. Patrice says, back the truth instead of backing the blue, or not backing the blue. Exactly. Every case is unique. There are corrupt stadies, and the majority of people are good cops. They're the same with local police, same with the feds. I don't know how people don't understand that. I don't know why suddenly a lot of the people, most of the people on both sides of the case that I talked to on the sidewalk out there, were very strongly pro-Trump. I don't think I've talked to anybody that didn't vote for Trump. I'm not saying that's a good or bad thing. I'm just saying it's a fact. And so one of the reasons the people that vote for Trump tend to mistrust the feds. But yet in this case, the Trump people that are in the pink shirt army, they somehow believe the feds are beyond question. They're just knights in shining armor. I don't really understand that. There's too much evidence here that something is fishy. There's too much undeniable evidence. So Nuno would not I wasn't implying that anybody should. I just was saying I've noticed it as a phenomena that most people on both sides seem to be Trump supporters. It's just an interesting phenomenon, just an observation. This is a state that's going to vote 65% Democrat and 25% for Trump. So it's a little bit notable that most of the people on both sides of this don't reflect those odds at all. It's completely the opposite. So William says, been in many drunken fights with friends and luckily never had anything lead to an accidental death. I don't get into fights with friends like that, even when I was younger. However, in my days of running bars, I was in the middle of 1,000 of them or more. So I do know what it's like, and I know what it's like from watching tempers flare quickly when people are drinking. I would have no problem believing that someone could go to an after-hours party and get into a fight, and things could go wrong. The problem is that just doesn't match the evidence. And the idea that you're going to beat someone within an inch of their life, and then instead of calling an ambulance to save him, even if it's in your own interest to do that, because it's very hard to get away with murder. So it's in your own interest to call the ambulance. But instead, your plan is to leave this guy on your own lawn. I mean, that just doesn't make any sense. And all these people are in on it. I don't get it. You know, I was listening. One of the ones that I was listening to today, those old interviews. Karen's brother is saying how the SUV was towed at 4:18, and then the main taillight piece is found magically sitting on top of the snow at 5:45. It was not found sitting on top of the snow. This is what Turtle people and Karen Reed people thought last year, and it was laughable because you could see the shovel marks right next to it. But there's such a desire to want to believe in this case that people just, they suspend their ability to think critically. Well, now we have the testimony that it was buried 3 feet down into the snowbank. It was not found sitting on top of the snow like that. But, you know, if you just, even if we're willing to say we don't know anything about Michael Proctor, and maybe like someone had some really powerful way to control him, like they had real bad dirt on him, and you say, and so you're going to tell him to help you rig a murder conspiracy. If you just, somehow you do it, and even though the feds get all your communications, they don't find any evidence of it, right? That's weird, isn't it? But they don't find any evidence of Proctor. They don't find any communications to Proctor from the Alberts that morning, right? So how was he even instructed in this whole scheme to plant evidence? How would he know any of that? But even if you assume that maybe they're all part of some secret society and they all have special burner phones that only people in the club have, and the Alberts are in it, and the McCabe's are in it, and Proctor is in it, and Berkowitz is in it, and this secret phone that they all have, like a bat phone, through that, they communicated to Proctor, this is what we need you to do. Okay, let's hypothetically say that exists. Does his actions make sense from someone that was trying to run a conspiracy? So one of the things that he does is, because of the storm, even though he has his own SUV, his partner, Yuri Buchanan, has a big truck. So it's a record storm. So they decide to commute together. The streets still aren't cleared. So he goes with Yuri Buchanan. So now, if Yuri Buchanan has to be in on the conspiracy too. So you're growing it. So is he in on the secret club? Is Trooper Proctor able to say to Yuri Buchanan, hey, buddy, I'm going to have to ask. There's a guy who's a hero for his country, you know, who's had top security clearance in the Marines. But now Proctor's going to, and who's got his own family, Proctor's going to say to him, hey, buddy, I need you to help me set up a murder here because my sister once almost babysat for the brother of the homeowner. How is he going to pitch that to Buchanan? You need to take this risk. You need to help me risk your whole life and your freedom and your career in order to help me plant evidence in a murder case that I don't really know these people, but does that make sense? It doesn't make sense to normal people. I'm sorry, it just doesn't. And so if Proctor was in on this conspiracy, wouldn't he take his own vehicle so he'd be free to go around tampering and planting evidence? But he didn't do that. And Buchanan testified that he was with him every moment of the day. When Proctor's going to Dighton. Now, first of all, if his job is to tamper with the vehicle and plant evidence, wouldn't he have gone hours earlier? Wouldn't he even make that the first stop? But he goes in the afternoon. They get there pretty late. But he calls ahead to Dighton, the Dighton police, to have them meet him there. Now, would he do that? Is that a rational thing to do if you know your job is to get there and pry pieces of taillight? Wouldn't that be easier to do if there's no Dighton cops around? So, I mean, it's just so many areas like this where if you just stand there and turn off the pink blinders for a moment and just evaluate it rationally, that nothing even looks like a possible conspiracy here. It just doesn't. Even if you just put aside all the really powerful evidence against Karen and just look at this, it doesn't make sense. It really doesn't make sense. But I don't know. But butt dials, right? So I don't know. So William is suggesting that John had some. And you got to be careful. Now, at least you were careful enough, William, to use KA, but you're saying something extremely baseless and saying something that's very cruel. You're saying that he was earlier in his career was part of the sexual assault cases, but you're also not making sense and you're thinking about it backwards. If John O'Keefe has information on somebody else, how do they use that to control him? You see what I'm saying? That's not the way it would work. Someone would have to have information on Michael Proctor. I don't know. No, it's just you're not thinking this stuff through. If somebody had some evidence that could be used to control Michael Proctor, how do they communicate it to him? There's no evidence of it, right? But let's assume that even though the feds get all the communication, somehow has some secret way of communicating smoke signals or something to Michael Proctor. And they put up the bat sign, we need you to help you to rig this case. Do his actions seem like somebody that was trying to rig a case? Wouldn't he get in his own vehicle? Wouldn't he get out to Dighton early? Doesn't do any of that. The longer you wait to get to Dighton, the more chances that Karen's father is going to go out and take a picture. So, I mean, you guys are trying to connect dots here without really thinking about it in a common sense, rational kind of way. So, all right, let's call it a night. Time for ice cream. Thank you for being here, guys. And hopefully I won't have to come back for a week. All this breaking news means I keep having to come back, but I really want to just plow ahead on the book and keep working on it.